You're here, so you've tuned into Joe's Music Something. Well, I know it's a big confusing, so let's learn something about music. Joe's Music Something. We'll learn about the notes, chords, beats, sound, but almost getting out of bounds. It's Joe's Music Something. From Baltimore County Public Library.
Hello, and welcome back to Joe's Music Something. I am the aforementioned Joe, and today's Music Something is the brass instrument family. No, that's a bass. Now that's a bass, but we'll talk about that later. Now last time, we spoke about the history of the woodwind family and what makes a woodwind instrument a woodwind instrument. This time, we're going to dive into the other family of wind instruments, brass, and what defines them. But before that, let's talk about where they came from. So, what even is brass? Well, brass is a combination of copper and zinc, two metals and elements we can find on the periodic table. These metals are melted down and mixed in order to make them stronger. The resulting brass is made into things like doorknobs, zippers, and musical instruments. However, brass instruments find their roots much earlier than the invention of this alloy. Before smelting was the hip new thing, people used what was around them, like shells found on the beach, the horns and tusks of animals, and more. But back then, these proto-brass instruments weren't necessarily used for music in how we understand it today, but rather for military strategy and religious ceremonies. Some of those same instruments are even used to this day, like the Hebrew shofar, an instrument made from a ram's horn and used in synagogue leading up to and during the Jewish holiday Rosh Hashanah. While modern brass instruments have a lot more bells and, well, I guess not whistles, because those are woodwind. I digress. Horns, shells, and tusks are transformed into instruments by hollowing them out and creating a hole in the tip that we can blow into, which leads us to the big difference between brass and woodwind instruments. But before that, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, you!
Me?
Yeah, you!
Me too?
Sure!
Well, can I
The more the merrier! Are you sick of having to rely on some cane or a fipple to make your notes for you? Is your arm getting tired from scraping your frog all day? Ugh! Then you should try
brass instruments. The true, new to you, and little boy blue kind of music experience. They're bright and shiny. Ooh. Sometimes tiny. Aww. And a little whiny. But the best part is about their vibrations.
Their what?
Vibrations. For brass instruments, they come from your own lips. No newfangled reeds or sticks needed. Just buzzing from your own body. These vibrations are organic.
So organic.
So come on down to Billy B's Brass Backlog, right off 52 South, behind the McClarys. Billy B's Brass Backlog. We know the brass tacks, brass facts.
Billy B's Brass Backlog. Bold, beautiful brass.
Wow. Support your local businesses, folks. Anywho, Billy's right. What makes a brass instrument is that our lips buzz into this thing we call the instrument's mouthpiece, creating the vibrations. The same sort of noodly waves we talked about in the woodwind video, and thus sound and notes. Those waves are amplified and brightened by the instrument itself. Without the mouthpiece or instrument, the buzzing sounds a little like this. But wait, there's more! One of the other notable features of brass instruments is that they use these things called valves, like we find inside here, here, and here. To clarify, a valve is a device for controlling the direction of fluid or air through a pipe, duct, or any other sort of passage. But brass instruments aren't the only places we see valves. Now, I know it's been a while, but let's revisit the heart from my video about beat. But let's make it a little more anatomically correct. There we go. We all know our heart beats, but let's dig a little deeper and talk about why. The blood in our bodies works in a circuit, continuously moving because our heart keeps it moving. See, each heartbeat pushes blood from the heart to the lungs to add oxygen and brings it back, while at the same time pushing already oxygenated blood into the rest of the body, delivering that oxygen, and then bringing the now deoxygenated blood back to the heart to repeat the process. Now, our heart makes sure the blood is going the right way by including valves here and here, making sure the blood doesn't double back because it left its water bottle on the table and we're already 15 minutes into I-95. Valves on brass instruments likewise help direct the flow, but with air instead of blood. For example, let's take this trumpet. Now, we're going to slightly modify it so we can see all of the tubing clearly. There we go. If we don't press anything, the air travels through the instrument like this. But if we press, let's say, the first key, it goes this way. Or if we press the third key, it goes here. And so on and so forth. Now, think about the last video. Does pressing one of the keys make the note higher or lower? Lower, because when we press the keys, the air travels a longer distance. If nothing is pressed down, brass instrumentalists can only hit a handful of notes. But using these valves allows them to change which notes they can access, and thus play more different songs. The most notable exception to this is the trombone, which still changes notes by extending and shortening the distance the air travels, but does so with this thing called a slide, producing higher notes when the slide is pulled inward, and lower notes when the slide is pushed outward. But the trombone, like many other brass instruments, does have the colloquial spit valve. The spit valve helps get rid of all the spit that accumulates inside of your instrument by, well, releasing it. Music is messy, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Another distinction between brass instruments is whether they have cylindrical bores or conical bores. Cylindrical bore instruments, like this natural trumpet, keep the diameter of the tube consistent until it reaches the bell at the end, giving the instrument a more piercing, direct sound. We see the cylindrical bore featured most prominently with the trombone, as well as the trumpet. On the other hand, we have the conical bore instruments, which, much like me at a summer cookout, feature a gradually expanding diameter, which gives the instruments a warmer, more dulcet sound. The simplest version of this type of instrument would be the vuvuzela, which, fun fact, was so loud and annoying that it was banned from the World Cup in 2014. If being loud and annoying was the concern, why not just throw out all the fans? Okay, that's it. I'm switching to markers. No. Too late. I apologize. Let's get back on track. In this cylindrical bore camp, we have the tuba, the French horn, and the cornet, amongst many others. And we're actually not limited to just brass instruments. Woodwind instruments can likewise be organized this way. For example, the flute is considered cylindrical, while the saxophone is conical. Some brass instruments, like the native Australian didgeridoo, can be constructed as either cylindrical or conical. To sum everything up, The brass family is made up of long, round instruments that make sound by us buzzing our lips against the mouthpiece. They used to be made out of shells and horns, but now they're typically made out of brass, hence the name. Many of them also feature keys, bells, and valves. Valves, which we also have in our hearts, ensure air, or liquid, travels the way we want it to, and are used in many brass instruments to change the notes we play, such as the French horn. While the trombone changes notes with a slide, and some don't use anything, like the didgeridoo and the shofar. Finally, some expand between the mouthpiece and the bell, like the conical board tuba. While instruments with cylindrical bores remain consistent throughout, like the trumpet. Well, that's all I've got this time. I hope you learned something. And if you didn't, I hope you came up with a new word for musical instrument. It's starting to feel like gibberish every time I say it. Next time, we'll dip into my forte, string instruments, like the bass. No wait, the bass. Anywho, until then, this has been Joe's Music Something. Thanks for watching. For more resources, check out bcpl.info.